well. Nate Hochman joins us. He's the executive director of America 2100, and he's all over this. Nate, good to talk to you today, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me, Vince.
All right, so we've had some discussions over the years about all these organizations that have been taking our cash to bring in foreign nationals. Is this as big of a deal as it seems?
It's incredibly big deal. I mean, what you have to understand is the mass immigration crisis in general, like it's not an accident, right? It wasn't just something that sort of happened to magically start, a decade or so ago. It's a well-oiled system, and at the very center of the system are these gigantic non-governmental organizations, NGOs, nonprofits, charities. Some of them are religious, some of them are secular, but all of these NGOs are receiving hundreds of millions of dollars a year from the federal government. And they're the ones who are facilitating the border crisis from all the way down at the bottom of South America, ferrying illegals all the way up to the border,
Yes.
and then resettling them here in the country.
So, and they dress it up as some sort of humanitarian mission, like as if they're running a soup kitchen for hungry people. But that's not really what this is it?
No, I mean, I think if you ask some of the people who are working there, they are ideologically committed to mass immigration. They think that America accepting infinite immigrants at all times is, the moral, humane thing to do. But a lot of people are making a lot of money off of this. I mean, again, when you've got hundreds of millions of tax dollars coming out every single year of the federal purse,
Yes.
There's a lot of money to be made, and they have a vested interest in continuing that system.
And also, if you are deciding whether or not you are going to illegally immigrate into the United States, it's a big deal to know that once you arrive, you will be placed with an organization that's going to provide for everything that you need, your travel, your shelter, your accommodations, getting to your destination. There's a full-blown travel agency at somebody else's expense that's dedicated to helping you succeed in that illegal mission, right?
Well, it's even better than a travel agency. Most travel agencies don't give you a cash card or just cash in envelopes, which is what a lot of these NGOs and charities do. I mean, they have videos and pictures of these NGO workers literally handing out cash in envelopes to illegal immigrants coming across the southern border. And again, where's that cash coming from? Almost entirely from the taxpayer purse. It's just converting it from tax dollars into cash in envelopes to hand out to illegal immigrants.
And I've noticed through the years that when reporters would try to get close to any of these organizations to see what they were doing as they were bringing in all of these foreign nationals, that they were always treated like something very duplicitous was going on. They didn't want cameras. They didn't want attention. They didn't want any of these images to be captured. So I just off the top of my head, people like James O'Keefe trying to get to the bottom of this, or Bill Maloogian at the Fox News Channel. You've got all these people who were trying to, real reporters trying to get answers, who were constantly given kind of the curtain treatment. Don't look behind this curtain.
Absolutely. And I think a big part of that is because almost all of these NGOs are effectively acting as an extension of the federal government. All of their migration budgets are almost 100% covered by the federal government. That's where the money's coming from. So it's the federal government, and especially, bureaucracies like the State Department, outsourcing their pro-mass migration, pro-illegal immigration policy to these ostensibly non-governmental actors. And that's one of the reasons why it's such a scandal, is that all of this is effectively government policy by any other name.
Right. And I think the most important point you've brought so far, everything you're saying is great, but that was at the outset that none of this was an accident. None of this was, we were just we didn't know what to do about the border crisis. It was the U.S. government that was creating it in concert with these NGOs. And so when President Trump comes in and he decides right away that he's stripping all of the funding, that's one of the biggest possible ways you could get all of this under control, right?
Absolutely. I mean, look, the reason people come to America now en masse is because it's a magnet. All of these different things are incentives for people to come here. You can come here, you'll have an NGO hand you, a stack full of cash. They'll get you a job. They'll find you housing. You'll get to go on welfare. If your kids are born here, they get to become citizens. You have access to the healthcare system. All of that stuff didn't exist during the Ellis Island era. You hear advocates of immigration today talk about how we're a nation of immigrants and this is just like Ellis Island. It's not. When you came over in the Ellis Island era, Like it was you and your work ethic, and that
Yes.
was about it. Nobody was going to give you a hand up. Now you have all of these goodies that are available to you, again, on the taxpayer dime.
No, that's
that
right.
didn't exist back then.
That's right. In fact, every Ellis Island story I've ever heard always includes like somebody just arriving with the shirt on their back and a couple of dollars in their pocket. And typically those stories detail exactly how much money was in the pocket. It was like 74 cents was in the man's pocket as he arrived at Ellis Island. And in fact, they usually would take something from you, right? Corey and Ganamort, his family lost the letter on the end of their name. They literally, he got here. His family was in Ganamorte. They stripped the E off the end of it because they were just rushing people through. Now he's in Ganamort, living with the consequences of what was stolen from him at Ellis Island. This is a very different world, isn't it, Nate?
Absolutely. I mean, it's sort of perfectly American. You meet all these Americans these days whose names are sort of bastardized versions of, Eastern European or Irish or whatever names. And you could tell that it was just some immigration officer at Ellis Island going, it sounds like this. That's good enough. And that's the family name from then on. So,
yeah. No, this is very different. Also, just to remind people, those people all came in legally, whereas everyone we're talking about is coming in completely illegally and is being given goodie bags and no COVID jab requirements. Do they? They don't have that, Nate, right?
No, it's the jab requirements are only for citizens.
Yeah.
Right. If you're coming in illegally, it's basically anarchy. But it's not even just anarchy because, again, like all of this is structural and systemic. It's not just this chaotic people crossing the border. Like these NGOs, which again are being funded by your tax dollars, are literally ferrying people up from South America. They have way stations in the Darien Gap and all these other places with shelter and medical services. They have humanitarian transportation vans. That's what they call it, humanitarian transportation, to literally drive them up to the border. And then once they get to the border, not only do they have cash, they have an army of lawyers waiting there who are there to help them beat U.S. immigration laws, to coach them on what they have to say to qualify for asylum. And then once you do that, they'll resettle you in a town or an American community or a city. So from start to finish, it starts well south of the border. That's what these NGOs are doing.
And that legal counsel continues while those illegal foreign nationals are in the country. Those same organizations are giving these guys attorneys to help them stay in the country and to evade detection from immigration and customs enforcement. It really is as corrupt as it could possibly be.
Absolutely. What people have to understand is these groups exist to subvert and undermine U.S. immigration law. Like that's what their MO is. That's literally what they exist to do. And that's why it's so scandalous that they're effectively extensions of the government, is that it's the government effectively funding the subversion of our own laws, of the laws that they're supposed to be enforcing. So you can't understand mass immigration crisis without understanding the central role that these groups play. And that's why Trump cutting them out at the knees is such a monumental victory.
And these are also 501c3s. They're tax-exempt organizations, so they're not subjected to the same taxation that the rest of us are. So they have all these incredible carve-outs and privileges. And most, I would venture a guess that most Americans had no knowledge of how this was all built using their money.
Well, and tragically, not all of them, but a lot of them are religious, right? You've got the 10 big NGOs, the Volklags, that's what they're called, that work with the state government or the State Department. Most of them are religious. You've got Catholic Charities. You've got the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, which is Jewish. You've got a Lutheran World Charities. Like there's a lot of these Christian and other denominational charities, which are extensions of churches, right? And it's tragic that churches that the faith, which is obviously such a central part of American life, has been sort of perverted and bastardized and co-opted by these mass immigration activists.
Yes. Well, what they've done is they've taken organizations with noble missions, and they have subverted their intent towards really kind of cruel political goals, because in the end, this doesn't actually help the people in question. What it does is it creates an underclass that's exploited by the ruling class in the United States of America, and that also comes at the expense of American workers. This is why, in the case of the Catholic Church in particular, when we talk about Catholic Charities and the ways that it's been subverted, if you look at the writings of, like, say, Pope John Paul II, he was crystal clear about the need to be both welcoming and accommodating to refugees, but simultaneously to be deeply respectful of a country's laws, the requirements for assimilation, and not to aid and abet illegal immigration. And yet that Catholic Charities by taking in hundreds of millions of dollars, has subverted a noble mission into something unrecognizable.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the problems is across the board, a lot of modern Christian leaders have confused Christianity with liberalism, right? So they now insist that things that no Christian prior to 1960 would ever believe was a Christian imperative are now moral imperatives for any Christian. If you're a Christian, you have to support open borders. That would again strike almost every Christian for all of the history of Christendom up until about 5 minutes ago as nonsense. But now a lot of these faith leaders are effectively insisting that it's a mandatory part of being a Christian.
That's right.
Which is obviously absurd.
Well, I mean, if you're looking for any other easy ways to determine, who's gone astray, look no further than that Episcopal priestess last week who was screaming at Trump and J.D. Vance and saying that what we need is more girls who think they're boys and vice versa. That's You've come pretty far from the Bible, and now you're just in full-blown left-wing politics. Hey, Nate Hochman, thank you with America 2100. Thank you for all of your wisdom on this and so many other things. Good to talk to you today, sir.